How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Deciduous Bonsai podcast. I'm Andrew Robson, a Deciduous Bonsai professional here in my studio, Rakuyo Bonsai in Portland, Oregon. And I have with me my friend, student, and relatively new bonsai practitioner, Maciek. Maciek, welcome to the podcast.
How you doing?
And so on our podcast, we talk all about deciduous bonsai and the many different facets that can take. So Maciek, what are we talking about today?
Probably the most topical thing we could talk about, which is deciduous trees, and specifically the question of why deciduous? Why deciduous over other types of trees?
Why deciduous? Why should you have deciduous bonsai in your collection? I'm a very unbiased person to talk about this.
Yeah, the most
but
unbiased.
I also have a lot of passion for this. This is kind of where I've set myself up to be. So, when I was building Rakuyo is the Japanese word for deciduous. It literally translates to deciduous or falling leaves. But my impression in the bonsai community was that deciduous were always kind of secondary to conifers. We always hear black pine is the king of bonsai in Japan. Junipers are the ones that get all these crazy, prices when the economy in Japan's doing well. And I don't know, I always felt like deciduous shouldn't be second place. They should be kind of like right up there with them. And you even hear that in the language of Japan. Like the Japanese don't call deciduous bonsai rakuyo.
Oh, they call it miscellaneous or something like that.
They call it miscellaneous,
yeah.
zoki. Zoki is the word for miscellaneous or other. And so it's like you have pines, you have junipers, and then you have other over there. And deciduous get kind of like wrapped up in the other category. And I was like, wait a minute, like, these are not other, like, there's a whole world of people that, like, geek out about Japanese maples and beeches and hornbeams and all these really cool plants.
Some of those maples and hornbeams and Japanese some of those maples and beeches get kokufu prizes.
They do.
They're not less.
They win awards in Japan, but, they're not valued the same, which is interesting to me. Like, you don't see $1 million beeches in Japan the same way that you might see $1 million juniper or something like that. It's like there's like a price cap for really good deciduous in Japan. It's like 30 to 50,000, somewhere in that range. You don't really see things elevate above that, but you do see conifers regularly elevate above that. So that never sat well with me, and especially being someone who's so enthusiastic about deciduous bonsai. And
yeah, I think that bias might be a little bit cultural. It might just feel natural from a Japanese point of view, but I think globally people are into whatever they're into.
Yeah,
it's not a default for humans.
And there's a lot of, one of the lovely things about bonsai is there's so many pathways that you can take and have fun with. There's people who have fun only growing young trees. There's people who have fun only refining and maintaining old trees. There's people who like to have one of everything. There's people who only have Japanese maples. So it's kind of fun to explore and play with. But all of that said, deciduous, speaking about that variety, deciduous does offer a ton of variety for someone who gets bored easily. One of the first things we're going to talk about is seasons. Like, seasonality in deciduous, like, they give you 4 times what a conifer does in a year.
It's more than just the seasonality, the surface level seasonality. It's also the effect on you as a person, right? You get to look forward to seasons. You get to look forward to every season because there is some stage of deciduous practice that is super exciting in every season.
Yeah, we're doing something in almost all of those 4 seasons. In spring we might be pinching, in summer we might be leaf cutting, in fall we might be pruning, and in winter we might be putting on guy wires and adjusting the silhouette. So there's, you're probably touching your deciduous trees a lot more. Just because of all of those things. But the seasons, like, I'm someone who gets bored a lot. Like, I was always the kid that would, like, rearrange the room, like, 5 times a year.
Like a scene change in a play?
Yeah, because just staying stagnant was not interesting. And that's why one of the reasons I love deciduous is because, here, if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, we have a Shishigashira right behind us. This thing has 4 really distinct seasons. Right now, I just cut all the leaves off, so we're forced it kind of into winter. It's just, I don't know, this tree looks different every single season of the year, and it feels like I have 4 trees rather than 1.
Yeah. We were talking about this earlier, you and I was sort of saying, I love the way that deciduous practice helps me keep time. or even helps me slow down time. I think a lot of us come to bonsai for many different reasons, but I think some of us are just trying to increase our quality of life.
Yeah.
You know, get more out of every year that we spend on this earth.
Yeah.
And a tree that is always changing
is one that's going to slow you down.
Yeah, whether it's by season or even from week to week, a tree that is always changing, even in the winter, the buds are expanding, right, is going to slow down time for me, and I'm going to appreciate the details. And it's funny because the tree is moving fast, but time is moving slow.
Yeah.
That's an interesting part of deciduous for me.
Yeah, it's something that, it's an argument that's lobbed against deciduous a lot, is that, oh, well, that's going to take 20, 30 years. It's not like a conifer is not going to take you 20, 30 years if you start with a young plant as well.
Yeah, maybe a misdirected ire towards just bonsai taking a long time in general.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is deciduous are faster than almost any conifer if we look at the building kind of format. I mean, Ebihara or Oishi would build a tree in 20, 25 years and win a Kokufu prize. You can't get enough good bark on a white pine in 25. You can't hardly get any bark on a white pine in 25 years.
Yeah, I think it's something like 30 or something.
Yeah, 30 is when it starts.
Yeah.
And so it's, it's deciduous isn't as, because of all of this hyper seasonality, it's not a slow process. It always feels like there's something kind of going on. So
we kind of touched, I guess we touched on one of the other things that we want to talk about just now, and that is that deciduous moves quickly, but in a way that gives you more steps or iterations or more progress per year. You can witness more of bonsai in your lifetime. There's another spin on the theme of making better use of your time. And one thing I've learned being exposed to bonsai professionals that get results, that achieve their bonsai
and that's an
dreams,
important distinction, because
they can move fast.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's with deciduous. If we look at like a trident maple, for example, and not every deciduous is fast, but if we look at a trident maple, for example, if you're defoliating that 2 or 3 times a year, that's like 2 or 3 springs that you're kind of adding, and you just can't get that with a ponderosa pine or most conifer species.
Yep. And for me that works whether I'm results oriented or I'm just learning a species. Yeah. I like the idea that I could really know a lot about a species in just 3 or 4 years just by playing with it at some scale.
Yeah, because you get so many more iterations, because you are pinching not just once in the spring, but maybe a lot of times in the spring. You're leaf cutting every time it grows a new set of leaves. You're constantly kind of adjusting. Yeah.
I'm sort of reminded of the knowledge that we have in the northern hemisphere of people in the tropics developing trees like dramatically fast because they have that ability to just work constantly.
Yeah, if you're in Taiwan and you're constantly just defoliating your ficus every other month, and
so for those of us
off.
for winters, I mean that's the closest I think we're going to get.
In deciduous, we still have that. We're just not doing the same work every time like they are in Taiwan. We're doing a different set of seasonal work every time, which I also find exciting. Again, if you're someone who gets bored, what we do in the winter is totally different than what we do in the spring. So
you get to wear 4 hats every year.
You get to wear 4 hats every year.
You get to welcome that seasonality with all your friends. You get to go help them with their repots. You get to go help them with their pinching. You get to go help them with all that stuff, and everybody progresses at a very rapid rate.
It's so fun for me with all the work travel that I do. I think I've been on over 100 flights this year. So I just got back from Minnesota, and they're in fall right now, and they're 3 weeks ahead of my fall. And so it's cool to kind of, as I travel to all these different clients or study groups, kind of track the progression of the seasons in all these different locations and climates and time zones.
I guess it is geographical, right? It moves from north to south.
Yeah, because I'll start my fall work, way north, and then my fall work starts to kind of move down. So that 2 months from now, I go do fall work in Texas. So it's kind of neat. It's fun, but that seasonality is just keeps it really refreshing, something new every time. And just like the aesthetic of the seasonality on our trees, if I can just reiterate that one more time, like, in winter we appreciate the silhouette. We appreciate something different in every season. We appreciate the silhouette in winter, all the branch structure, all the beautiful fractal patterns that we're so focused on making.
Spring is, I guess, vigor, fresh green.
Yeah, and these colors that are intense, they're lighter, they're, the buds even swelling. You can have trees like Deciduous, which have beautiful spring color. A lot of Japanese maples have beautiful spring colors. You know, this shishi right behind us is like the most chartreuse green when it comes out, and then it shifts to like a dark emerald green in the summer. So like, even though it's in leaf in spring and in leaf in summer, it's a different color and it's different.
That reminds me of one thing I learned here. Just the exposure in a professional garden to like the wide range of deciduous species makes you realize, hey, fruit and flowers happen at a variety of times of the year, and that in itself also, it's almost like I think you've mentioned this earlier when we were talking about it, like almost like micro seasons.
Yeah, the Japanese have, I think, is it 24 micro seasons?
Right.
So like you could go to like Kobayashi's garden in Japan, and you could say, I need a scroll for spring. And he'll respond to you saying, well, which spring?
Which part of the spring?
Yeah, there's like cherry blossoms, but that's a very different spring than, you know, this other thing that's going on. And you know, it's you know, and only in this week of spring, you know, this bird flies over. And it's, you know, they're so hyper seasonal there because they kind of live their life based on the seasons. If you have a bento box, you know, you're going to get different things in the food for different seasons, and it's not just 4. There's a lot more than that. So it's.
I guess one thing that for me that does is it keeps the wheel spinning. It adds spin to the wheel more times per year because it adds some excitement more times per year.
Yeah.
Throughout the year evenly, so I maintain my excitement level in bonsai throughout the year, and I'm active. I'm practicing bonsai.
Yeah, and it's keeping you up to date because you're not doing what you're doing the next 2 weeks that you maybe did the last 2 weeks.
Right.
And things in your garden are changing too. Like you can go out with a big deciduous garden or bench even. You know, you can notice something changing like almost every single week. You know, I go on a work trip. Usually my work trips are 5 days or so. I'll come home 5 days later and like be like, wow, the Shishigashira decided to explode, or you start noticing all these little details.
Yeah. For me, it's like even 2 or 3 days away from the garden. I go to a seasonal here for 2 days, and I go back. Because I've been coming home. I've been coming home late at night or whatever, and I didn't even look at the garden. Yeah. And then I look at it on Monday morning, like, holy crap. Yeah. A lot of progress.
It's fun, and that keeps it just fresh, at least for me. So that's one of the main reasons I like it.
So deciduous trees end up a bit more real time, and I feel like I pick up, I learn how they act faster as a result. So this is going back to this whole idea of seeing more bonsai in less time. Yeah. Right? I almost get a sense of the organism almost in real time, like I'm living the time lapse with it.
Yeah, if you can work on your trident maple 4 or 5 times a year, which is what we normally do, then you know you're going to learn way more about that than a lodgepole pine that you work on once a year.
Yep, you'll have seen extensions grow on the tree 5 times in that year. Yeah, you know, so you'll have made like dozens of nodes. Yeah, you'll have a very intimate understanding of internodes and all of those things and what happens. If you defoliate and then cut and then wire and then see another flush and then defoliate and wire and see another flush and all that stuff. So, iteration speed.
Iteration's fun. I mean, that's really, we should probably talk about black pine because that's really why black pine is such a great teaching tree. And for anyone at home who's a conifer person who's like, but black pine, I can work on that 3 times a year.
It's kind of like an honorary deciduous club member.
Yeah, it feels more deciduous in its work requirement than pretty much every other conifer.
Yeah, similarly, I guess redwood, especially in
redwood is a pretty busy thing. But you're kind of, unlike the Shishigashira where I'm doing something radically different every season, the redwood, I'm just kind of doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. So it kind of gets a little monotonous for me. Yeah. So, I don't know, I just love the variety. You know, speaking of variety, we talked about how it can look on the tree. We've talked about how it can manifest itself in the work. You know, I think just the variety of forms of deciduous is really exciting, let alone species. Those are 2 totally different things. So let's tackle species first. Like, you know, if we're talking conifers, we can say pines, junipers, spruce, hemlock, fir, redwood, cryptomeria. And now my brain starts running out. I'm probably missing an obvious
and it pretty much just boils down to cypresses, pines, and araucarias, and that's it. Those are like the 3 big.
And those are like 8 genuses of plants that we use for conifers, right? Yeah. With deciduous, like
you still have a few thousand to go, tens of thousands.
It's way more infinite. You know, there's beeches, hornbeams, elms, maples, Stewardias, all the
Poplars.
flowering plants, witch hazel, winter hazel, quince.
Chochubai.
Japanese quince versus Chinese quince, two totally different plants.
Cotoneaster.
Yeah, styrax, birch, alder, cottonwood. I mean, and we could come up with 30 more. And that just alone, that variety of plant material is really, really fun.
I guess it increases the likeliness that there is some deciduous species that will work good for you, for your preferences, for the style that you want to achieve, and in your local
There's so much
climate.
variety that you're going to find something that you like, even if you're not maybe even a deciduous person.
Right.
So I think that's really exciting and fresh. And I mean, the cool thing is there's even certain things like Japanese maples, for example. I think you could have an entire fulfilling bonsai practice exclusively growing Japanese maples, because you have Shishigashira, you have Arakawa, you have Desojo, you have Kiyohime, you have all of these varieties in this one species of a genus that
they can show surprisingly different forms.
Different forms, and that would be a really rewarding bonsai practice, is just having Japanese maples and going really deep in that. There's people in Japan who do that, like Ebihara.
Is that your stranded on a deserted island species or genus?
Oh, ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, maybe we'll leave that for
no. Let's talk about. Yes, I would choose Japanese maples. If I had to grow one species for the rest of time, and I could have at least the different types within the species, I would choose Japanese maple.
Yeah. That's hard to say for, I guess, a conifer. It's not as easy to vary your form, I don't think.
No.
Maybe
I mean, you could say pine. I mean, but then, I mean, Acer palmatum, is a species, pine in general, unless we're talking black pine, yeah. White pine, there's 5 varieties that we commonly use. But that's still pretty limiting compared to maples.
Hundreds or maybe even thousands of just inside of Japanese maple cultivars.
Yeah, by the year 1600, I think there is already 500 different known cultivars of Japanese maple.
Right,
so we've been at this game for a while.
So that's species variety. There's
but yeah, the other thing we were going to talk about is form.
Right, growth form variety or habit.
Yeah, and so if we look back to conifers, we have trees basically, and lots of different types of trees: pine, spruce.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a plant category that's defined by its habit. By which we say, it's going to become a cone. The sex parts are cone.
Yep.
Everything's conical, right?
Yeah.
I think it's very, very different with deciduous. Very fast.
Yeah, you have a lot more variety in shapes and forms and lines. So in deciduous, we not only have trees, but we have shrubs and vines and some even weird-looking things like sumacs, which don't tend to float in any of that.
Right, but even though, so you have a sumac here. I don't know.
It's out there somewhere.
You have a sumac here that it really opened my eyes to the idea that something might still not have fine branching, but be absolutely killer in the tokonoma display and be very beautiful and have excellent line and be incredibly artistic. And every year of development, once it has that line, is just fully satisfying visually.
Yeah, it's kind of like the bunjin of deciduous. There's this whole, the aesthetic is oshare, which is like this provocative, kind of whimsical kind of feeling. I just did a YouTube video a few videos ago of Lindera spice bush, which is a species in Japan that they use a lot that has a lot of those crazy lines. But yeah, there's a group of plants like those are perfect examples. The sumac, the spice bush of things that just don't look like any other bonsai that you're going to see. Chochubai. I'm bringing a white chochubai to the Expo this year. That's, when do you ever see a spruce that's styled in bush form?
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, mugos maybe, but they're so undefined at that point. It's hard to define them. You don't get a winter silhouette out of it.
No. So it's just it just looks like a ball of green.
It's difficult to justify that ball.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're just always going to have that ball of green.
Yeah, there's never a season where that's all going to come off and reveal the truth.
Right.
And that may be another reason why deciduous is, there's a real honesty to deciduous bonsai. Like when those leaves come off, any wire scars, any branch scars, any bad pruning decisions,
the skeleton,
any reverse tapers.
the skeleton or the blueprint is revealed, or it's almost like going on a web page and clicking view source, if you know what that means.
Yeah, I mean, if we had to help, if in shows around North America, if we had to hold conifers to that same standard, almost no conifer would ever win over a deciduous.
Yeah. There's a lot of rules being broken behind those needles.
There is, and you can hide it. With deciduous, we don't get that excuse, so there is kind of an honesty to that, which I kind of like. It
like a forcing function, you would say?
Yeah. Well, it kind of, deciduous people tend to be way more structure kind of focused and oriented. You could go collect a Yamadori ponderosa pine, and you could put all this octopus kind of branching and make what from a photograph or even in person looks like a nice silhouette. But then you start looking close and you're like, well, that branch is 3 feet long and it's squiggled up into like a knot. Like that doesn't fly on the Japanese maple. That doesn't fly on a beach.
Yeah, it couldn't.
And so in Nabari, I mean, like some of the nicest some of the nicest conifers I've seen in Japan are from deciduous people. Like, one Oishi has a wonderful collection of black pine, and he's got a black pine with a Nabari that just like perfect, it looks like a Japanese maple, like perfect, nice, huge Nabari that comes out, extremely radial, extremely kind of glides over the surface of the pot. You just never see that in a typical pine grower garden.
Yeah, I have to say, studying here and being exposed to the Oishi study materials, and then also working
Oishi's awesome. Like he is...
Working on some of the beech here and the Circidophilium and all these things, the Katsura, it's made me think that maybe a good place to learn how to become a really good conifer artist is to actually go through deciduous school, because the attention to detail on wiring, and you said it yourself, right? The attention to detail on Nabari means that the deciduous artist is always thinking like a million steps ahead.
Yeah, we're playing chess, while conifers to me feels kind of like checkers.
Right.
And yeah, we are, this is a long game. We are thinking 10 steps ahead, but I don't know. In conifers, you're kind of just always resetting to this kind of basic design, and I don't know, that's boring to me. It's cool, and I actually think, this garden looks a little bare in the winter because I don't have too many conifers, and having some green in the winter as a nice counterpoint to the deciduous is nice, but it's just, that's always just felt...
Yeah, those highs are achievable, I think.
It's not that, and I'm not saying you can't develop a conifer.
Yeah. We're talking about preferences right now. We're not talking about like ground truth necessarily.
Yeah. But deciduous, I mean, it is this slow, long build, and because everything is exposed every winter, we just have to be really honest about, well, isn't that Nabari good or does it kind of suck? Like, is that trunk line good or does it have a lot of reverse taper? Like, is the silhouette good or are there some things we need to patch?
Yeah, I've noticed as a student here, also with other students and seeing the progression of their trees that they bring in, that there seems to be like a shorter decay time on sort of regret. Like we can correct mistakes in a huge way in deciduous. That's really difficult with conifers. Like, you can get there with conifers. You can do some
That's one thing that I love about deciduous also, is that the reset button on a deciduous is way easier to press. Like, if you bring me the most horrible bonsai that I've ever seen, I can fix it with a deciduous.
Right.
And there's a lot of different ways. Like, if the Nabari is good but the top of the tree is kind of terrible, we can trunk chop it and grow a new tree. That's easy.
Yeah. There's no such thing as like a useless Deshojo, I guess you could say, right?
No. And even if the bottom of if the Nabari, if the roots were all crappy and you have something nice on top, you air layer it off and start a new tree. Like deciduous, I think, has much more opportunity for quality. Every piece of material that's out there could be a prize-winning tree at the best show in the world. Maybe you only save a branch of it or something and air layer it and get a new start, but the potential is there. With conifers, it's hard to take one of those Home Depot pines, which are great learning trees for learning how to wire and cut and keep a tree watered and whatnot. It's really hard to take that and turn it into a kokofu pine.
Yeah, that Vanderwolf's Pyramid limber pine that you just bought, and I know you're out there. is only going to be a formal upright. That's
Yeah.
it. It's done pretty much. I mean, you could start something from that bottom branch, but let's be honest, you don't know how to wire with that.
Is this a Reddit thing?
That thick? No, I'm just talking to someone that I'm sure is out there, because I've contemplated that and I've done it.
Yeah.
You know, I've been there with a dwarf Alberta spruce and things like that. So,
Yeah, we all have.
yeah. It's difficult to reset, and again, that decay, the decay curve or the length of time you spend regretting, is pretty long, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, what should I do with this material now that I realize that I can't go anywhere with it?
Yeah. Well, that's why it's important to distinguish. Like, some trees are just learning trees, and some trees are going to be top trees, and there is a difference between, you know, actual quality bonsai and learning trees. Not every learning tree needs to turn into a great bonsai.
I think maybe that was the first time we mentioned the word quality during this episode, and that's what I think the forcing function of deciduous will turn you into a quality snob earlier.
Well, it turns you into a quality snob, right? Because we are seeing everything in winter, I think. That honesty, you get really brutal about it, and you accept it. It's kind of just part of the process.
So for the last couple of minutes, we've been talking about basically a material flexibility.
Yeah.
There's some material that's inflexible. There's some material that's very flexible.
Yeah.
You can take a cottonwood branch that's 6 feet long and chop it up into tiny little sausage pieces, and every single one will root as a cutting. Yep. That's profound to me, right? It means I can make forests, I can do shohin, mame, whatever, with a single cutting.
A lot of the extended techniques in bonsai are great for deciduous. Like, we can how easy is it to air layer an old pine branch? It's not really easy. A new young shoot or sacrifice, not hard, but for the average bonsai,
challenge accepted.
Yeah, challenge accepted. You report back. But yeah, for the average bonsai practitioner at home, you know, you're not going to air layer a pine. Right. You're not going to take cuttings of a spruce. I mean, these things aren't as easy as it is with maples and hollies and lots of other plants.
So we come back to this theme quite a bit through all the discussions that we have, which is like how to best use your time, because you're kind of running out of it at the moment you start bonsai.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, you're probably trying to get better at bonsai.
Yep. And
there's a lot of things that I've learned over the years, and we talk about nonstop when we're together, which is the stimulus for this podcast. But it's how to be productive in bonsai. Our first episode was how to get good at bonsai. You know, it's how do we use our time efficiently, because these do take a long time. You know, even though a Japanese maple is fast compared to a pine from scratch, we're still talking about 20 years. And if you're on the wrong trajectory, you might be on a 70-year trajectory when someone else can do it in 20.
Yeah,
so
a maple is fast, but it's still slower than ikebana. You know, a flower arranging.
Yeah, you make it in a day or two.
Or even making music or something like that, right? Yeah. You can do all these things much faster. So you have to, if you want to be good, you have to make good decisions about the use of time, or else you will just never have the time necessary to get good, because all of these skills are based on practice.
That's right.
And deciduous practice is just faster.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah. You know, the care of deciduous, I think, is sometimes a little easier as well. Like, deciduous tree, you do have to water them more, but there's the watering aspect of them. You're not fussing around with water as much. You know, not everybody has perfectly full sun, especially a lot of people who live in Portland who have a lot of big trees around them. Yeah. Light is a factor, but deciduous don't need a lot of light. I think just the general horticulture of them is a little bit more stable than conifers, especially if you're working with collected conifers. So yet another reason why deciduous are pretty cool. You know, I started Rakuyo because, you know, I fell in love with deciduous trees. I studied with Michael Hagedorn, who we've both studied with, and I would, like, when I was at Michael's, that was the first garden in North America where I was like, hey, there's like at least 40% of these are deciduous. Like, that's pretty cool. That's more deciduous than I've ever seen anywhere.
Yeah, I've noticed many other students, when they said why they went to study with Michael, it was just the breadth and variety.
Well, and that's why I apprenticed there. There's young trees, there's old trees, there's pot-grown trees, there's yamadori, there's, you know, native trees, there's Japanese trees. I feel like it was like the liberal arts school of bonsai study. And when I started there, like I didn't know that I liked deciduous as much as I do, but I started working on those old deciduous trees, and that's where I kind of got the bug bit. And I went to so many U.S. national shows. I went to the Arzens Cup, and I just kept seeing all these conifers getting all this attention. I'm like, wait a minute, like you just ripped that thing out of the mountain like 4 years ago, and it's winning a prize, and we have this spectacular beech over here that someone took 70 years, 7 decades to like get to this point, and we're just like throwing that out of the woods because someone got some copper wire and
it hits
bent a few branches.
It hits so much differently, especially in person. Like your soul gets hit with it when you are told that the tree you're about to touch and help work on was worked by somebody for like 35 years, and they're a local club member, and they're like gone now. They passed away, and then the tree passed away. Like that hits differently, right?
It does.
That iterative effort.
Yeah, the Shishigashira that we have here, this is going down to the Expo this year. This tree was started by one of my friends in the club, Bob Laws. He got it in 1991, the year I was born, so 32 years ago, as 2 trees that were grafted together. And I mean, I think I got it 8 years ago, so I've made very significant changes to the tree, but it still like really much reminds me of Bob every time I work on it.
Before we recorded this episode, I went to use the facilities, and I bumped into your dad, who was holding a book that had a picture of this Shishigashira from
the first U.S. national show.
And I was just shocked. And that's another thing. It's just a testament to the power of believing in the process of deciduous and making all those iterations. I have seen some kokufu trees. You've graciously lent me some kokufu albums from like the mid 20th century, like 1970s and things like that. Maybe a little later, the mid 20th. But it's shocking how some of those conifers have not changed all that much since some of those old pictures. If you also have pictures of them from very recent konifers.
Especially a juniper. Like juniper is the most boring conifer. Like you look at a juniper trunk like 50 years ago in the kokufu, and you look at it today, and it's like, wow, that's the same tree. It does not change at all. Pines, the bark will at least develop. They'll get bigger trunks over time. But junipers are like almost unrecognizable, which is cool because if you get a good one, it will stay good, but they don't really ever change. They're pretty stagnant.
So why are we banging on this drum so hard? Like, in my mind, it's because we really care about quality, and we want other people to share in that experience.
Yeah, I want people to make beautiful bonsai, and I think we talked with deciduous. There's a lot of variety in which that you can do that. So you're going to find something that's interesting to you within that very big group of plants. And like I said before, quality-wise, like the reset button, I travel a lot. I work on good trees, and I work on some not-so-good trees. And whenever someone puts a not-so-good tree in front of me, if it's a deciduous, we can make that a whole lot better. And the conifer not-so-good tree is...
You could become a better student in just a couple years and take material that you have huge regrets on and reset it. So you can catch up to your debts with deciduous in a way that it's really hard to with conifers.
Really, really hard to. Yeah. And that's exciting to me because it means that any student that I travel to around the country who brings me deciduous material, we can do something with that. Like there's a seed of quality there that we can nurture and develop and grow.
Yeah. You're telling me there's a chance.
There's a chance, yeah, and I think that's exciting. So, yeah, when I was going to all these big shows and seeing all these conifers getting this attention, that's when it was a part of the reason why I wanted to start Rakuyo is because it was, hey, these deciduous trees need some attention too. I became really passionate about them. I'm still to this day very passionate about them, and it's fun to be able to kind of be a voice for, there's also a lot of people who love deciduous trees. I can't tell you how...
In the general public.
Yeah, I can't tell you how often, like, someone will sign up for one of our intensive classes, or I'll be teaching a study group somewhere along the country, and someone will say, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to work with you because you do deciduous trees, and I like deciduous trees, and I wasn't getting that from this other person. And so it's cool to be able to kind of build that deciduous enthusiast community through the business. And I think we're actually starting to see some results in our shows. Like the Expo last year, or excuse me, 2 years ago, had more deciduous trees than I've ever seen in a in a big national level show. The U.S. National is getting more good deciduous trees. This coming expo that we have next weekend is, I think, going to have some really awesome deciduous trees. So I'm starting to see all this excitement manifest, and that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. I would say also that maybe this is a good closing point. A lot of people, I think, that are new to bonsai, especially in the West, like in Europe and in North America, they really want to forge a new path, do something different, distinguish themselves, become individuals that are known for something. And if you're looking for that, like, this is a place to strike out and do something new.
Yeah, look, when I started doing deciduous, like, Bill Valvanis was doing it, but he couldn't limit himself to only do deciduous, so he was doing a lot of different types of bonsai. And then you had several hobbyists like Dennis Foitila who were focusing on it, actually going to Dennis's place and seeing, you know, just a whole garage in the wintertime full of only deciduous. I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Like, this is what I want.
Hundreds of Pinot Noir.
Yeah, this is what I want.
Yeah, that was mind-blowing when I first saw it.
Yeah, and so, you know, I think we're turning the page. I think we're starting to see more deciduous activity pop up, and that's really rewarding. So, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's a foundational episode for the show because we just had to get this out.
Yeah, this might have been a good episode for number 1, but I don't know. We're at episode 4 now.
Yep.
And no, I think it's good to talk about because I know there's so many passionate deciduous people out there, and because the topic's so broad, there's a little something for everybody. Mm-hmm. Why do you like deciduous? Like you sign up and you've taken for a few years my deciduous intensives. Like why sign up for those?
Well, I think actually the trees came first. Like I encountered. I think cottonwood is really what lit it up in me, and then I transferred back. I came back to Japanese maple and rediscovered why it was interesting. Came back to a lot of other things.
Yeah.
But you know, seeing it in nature and becoming obsessed with the aesthetics, and then also witnessing again the seasonality in nature, in the mountains, right?
Yeah.
And then from there on, it was also just the speed of iteration, the ability to rescue the material, to bare root it if I wanted to get it into really good horticultural circumstances, and to know that like I'm building a really good tree on a really good foundation. I can reset it back to only the good parts, only the beautiful parts, and then build from there. And I can build fast, and I can learn fast. And so it's this really exciting, fast feedback thing. Yeah. And it's slowing down time.
So you mentioned cottonwood, and it's been fun to explore cottonwoods with you. And that probably warrants its own podcast sometime in the future.
And aspens.
Yeah. But what other than cottonwoods, what deciduous have you grown to really enjoy? Either with stuff that you have or stuff that you've worked on studying here?
Well, mostly maples.
Maples are pretty special.
Yeah.
I mean, we did do the whole second episode about Japanese maples, and we could probably do 20 more episodes on Japanese maples.
I've tried to do a bit of bonsai with big leaf maple, and I think that you and I are working together to see what the reducibility of that is, especially for shohin. I think it would be fantastic to have a shohin tree that's smaller than the leaf.
Yeah.
Like 3 times smaller than the leaf.
Well, it's a great story for people too, just conveying the coolness of bonsai. Like if you could show up to the Japanese garden and show off a big leaf maple that has leaves that are 1 inch and point to like the ones out in the landscape, I think that's like a really cool. Yeah. Like here's the power of bonsai. This is what we can do. Like
here, I think I've really loved the Katsura, the Circidifilium.
That's an odd one to love because
it's just a beautiful tree.
It's a beautiful, just the plant itself, the heart-shaped leaves, the color it gets, everything is magic about
Hazels and hornbeams and things of that nature are all like lit up suddenly on the map for me. I can see them, I can perceive them. I didn't see them before, and now I can't stop seeing them everywhere. It's that kind of thing. So that lit up for me. And then finally, the other big one for me that really showed me how fun deciduous could be and how fast feedback it could be was chochubai.
Ooh, what do you like about chochubai?
This is a work. The directional pruning, the fantastic detail, the contrast between the stone-like bark, which barks up pretty quickly, and all things considered. Yeah, between the stone-like bark
compared to a white pine.
Yeah, exactly. Bright red flowers in February. Stone
or
bark.
White.
Yeah, or white.
Or white.
And then in the summer, the green against that and everything. But the iteration style, the flow that you get into as a person.
Yeah.
You know, the anticipation of the next iteration, looking and seeing, and also the confidence that you get from knowing this species really responds well.
Yeah.
I know what to do.
Yeah.
Once that settles in, it's an incredible thing. Now, I don't have any of my own chochuai, but I've worked on them
One day.
here.
We need to get you some chochuai.
At Michael's. Yeah.
I'm
on that list. I'm on that waiting list.
Michael's infamous chochuai list.
Yeah, so I'm ready.
So you asked me the question. Maybe we'll close by me asking you the question. Desert island, you can bring one deciduous plant to do bonsai for the rest of time. One deciduous species.
Yeah, that's undecided yet, I think. I'm still... The thing is, I would be tempted to say, oh yeah, a poplar or a cottonwood, but actually, you know, I'm still working out, like...
You're still new in bonsai, yeah.
I'm still working out how well that species works.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you pick a native species, like, you have to test it a bit. You have to see how it responds.
If you're doing something that no one's ever done before, you either need to question why nobody's ever done before, or you need to prove to people why they should start doing it. And that can take years to explore, as we're kind of, 2 or 3 years into cottonwood, and still don't have definitive answers yet.
We have really strong hints, but no
We have
evidence.
good feelings, but not good
But,
answers.
you know, it would be hard to settle on something like chochubai because it's got kind of a particular kind of form or set of forms you can produce. It would be tempting to settle on Japanese maple just like you, because
you know what I think would be
works.
so cool, and I'm not sure I'll ever see it, but like, can you imagine coming to a garden the size of this, which is like 150 big deciduous trees? Can you imagine going to a garden, 150 trees, and it was like all ginkgos, or like all like just like a species that like
all Zelkova.
or all wisteria, like plants that like a diverse garden at most will just have 1 or 2 of. Yeah. Like, wouldn't that be like really cool?
Dennis had, I don't know, like at least 100 Pinot Noir when I went over there.
He has a lot of Pinot Noir. I mean, he does produce and sell them, so there's kind of that.
But that was one of the first times I'd walked into a garden and seen so much of one species, and yet lots and lots of variety in different forms, lots of weird contortions, like basically a playground for my imagination.
Yeah.
Right? And which species does that? I would say for you, it's Japanese maple. For a lot of people, it's Japanese maple, right?
Yeah.
But it could be a lot of things, because there's a lot of things out there.
Could be a lot of things,
that grow strong, right? You just need a strong growing species.
Yeah.
And like, we're spoiled for choice. There's lots of hedging species that are being sold in landscape centers and things like that, and go out there and find them.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I hope you enjoyed our episode on why you should do deciduous, why you should love deciduous, why deciduous matters, and why we're so passionate about it kind of as well. For me, who's been doing this for a while, and for Maciek, who's kind of just getting on that journey.
Getting the bug every year. It's
Yeah.
getting stronger and stronger.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. You've been watching Rakuyo's Deciduous Bonsai channel, our Deciduous Bonsai podcast. We'll see you next episode.
See ya.